keep coming back to the "I'm feeling lucky" phrase. I still to this day have the same passion for it. I sometimes don't feel like it's a job. It doesn't feel like work in a lot of ways.
It's pretty great to feel like work isn't really work after 15 years. That's how long Mike Pegg has been a Googler, which means he works at Google, at their headquarters in Mountain View, California. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr, and this is the Experience Podcast, the podcast where we go behind the scenes to answer the question, what is it really like to ... On this episode, Mike Pegg shares his experiences working at Google. From the free gourmet food to the excruciating interview process to nap pods? Let's go inside Google with Mike Pegg, the head of Google Maps Platform Developer Relations. Hello, Mike. Thank you for joining me.
I am really happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing from a Google insider because, Google products are such a part of our everyday lives now. But Google as a company has kind of taken on a mythic status, I feel like, for a lot of people. What is it? Who gets to work there? What is it like to work there? So that's why I thought it would be great to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm wondering if you could just kind of do a verbal walk through a typical day. You get there, how do you get to work? What do you do? Where do you sit? What do you eat for lunch? Take us through a day.
So first of all, I try not to drive any longer. I work close enough that I can ride to work. The bike to work culture is very strong. There's a guy that works with me at Google, lives a couple doors down, skateboards to work. He has a longboard that he'll actually skateboard all the way over. So I'll see him some morning. So that's like a fun, like seeing people on the bike paths kind of streaming into work. And then you'll pass by a shuttle stop. So you'll see weary-eyed, like, oh, what time did you have to get up to to make the SF commute? And then honestly, the first thing you do is you go into a cafe. And in our cafe...
And this is about what, 8 a.m., 9 a.m.?
Usually for me, around 8:30 is my kind of arrival time. And you'll go into a cafe. It's usually kind of bustling. There's a barista on one side, kind of like what would look like a Starbucks, essentially, is off to one side. And so people are queuing up, giving what their coffee requests are, getting breakfast. Usually eat a very quick breakfast, but it's usually really good. There's just so much on offer. Every cafe that has a breakfast service, it is the best, most delicious, healthy, vast array of breakfast items you could possibly imagine. Like, that's all I can say. It's amazing, and it changes every day. There's actually
like
a
made
food
to order
app.
things.
There's a made to order omelet station that you can go to if you want. There's an app that will tell you menus for different cafes around Google, and I will sometimes look at it for what the breakfast service is for the next morning, so I can kind of have an idea of what I want to zero into when I get there. So that's breakfast, and then usually from there, your workday will almost have started, because sometimes you'll be scanning what can I archive from my email while I'm eating, and you're sort of starting your workday, or you'll have breakfast, a meeting with someone. Then from there, it's relocate to my desk, say hello to my coworkers who might be around, and then from there, I will do initial like urgent work things that I need to do, then absolutely go and make myself a latte. And then usually you'll have at least 5 conversations in that moment too where you're making your coffee. The number of people by the time you actually sit down to work, you've easily talked to 20 people. And then from there, your work day, you've got your commuting to conference rooms, booking rooms if you need to, and then lunch. Lunch is another whole thing, like kind of similar to breakfast. And then your kind of afternoon snacks. I think I average about three-ish lattes a day, so I revisit that microkitchen a couple times. Occasionally, you'll have to go get on a bike and go across campus if you need to.
Can you talk a little bit about the grounds and the space? I mean, I've been there a few times. Everybody always talks about the beauty of the space. It's more like a college campus, and there's bikes that you can ride around, and you can go exercise or go get something to eat. And you can kind of have this nice flex schedule to facilitate your own sort of internal pace of work.
For me, personally, I've always been eager to learn about all parts of Google and to know all the different teams and the products we're building. And so when I go through the campus, if we were able to put large product logos on top of buildings, that's what I would visualize as I would move through Charleston. This is sort of the spine of main campus, as we call it. And I would visibly see, they weren't there obviously, but I would see large product logos of Google Magic around. Like I would say, oh, I know that building because I've had meetings with the Chrome team that build the Chrome browser. And that's where Chrome is built. And over there, that's the Gmail team, and that's where our email comes from. Even though a lot of those teams expand and move, I still see that's the original building where the Android team was when we were building and conceiving of the early Android operating systems. And that is where the Google Glass team was, and that's where I got fitted for the device that I got to test out. So I instantly see the different product teams and where those offices are. So the movement between those buildings too, because it is a sprawly campus, much like a US college campus. The bikes alone, they're just so iconic, the coloring of them, and there's probably about 5 or 6 different models. And the early ones were actually cruiser bikes that easily someone could just pick up and put in the back of a pickup truck and zoom down the coast and have at their beach house. But now, like, you wouldn't really want to take them. They're very difficult to get long. Even across campus, I felt like the Wicked Witch of the East or
Oh
West
yeah,
from Wizard of
these.
Oz. And I would have that song in my head whenever I'm riding them. You have to work really hard
Yeah, that's
to
on
pedal
purpose.
them.
Can we go back to the micro kitchens idea?
The micro kitchen concept at Google is worth explaining. Everybody thinks of the food and the cafes and the chefs and the teams, and like obviously that's amazing. 3 squares a day, you get really nice breakfast and lunch. There's some cafes that will have dinner service, even a few on the weekend that are servicing people that are working over the weekend. So that obviously is a big part of it. But the thing that's not quite as visible is we call them micro kitchens. They might be called break rooms where you go get your coffee. The level of thought and detail that goes into those is probably even more connects back to the beginning of Google than even the cafes themselves, because that moment of serendipity, like where I go, there's usually a very good espresso machine with a very good grinder with really good beans that have been sourced from local roasteries. And like I've become a huge espresso fanatic from just having access to these machines literally everywhere across campus. I know where all the nice machines are, where to go, and become a little bit of a barista.
You become a connoisseur.
Yes, totally. And there's these moments where you see people or you get a chance to talk to them and ask them what they're doing, in cafes as well around lunch. But it's just those spots where people meet through the middle parts of their day. Or
it's very informal.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm seeing you here. Yeah, it is informal.
Cynics might say that all the meals, breakfast to dinner and on the weekends were sort of designed to keep people there working. I mean, it can be seen either way, right? It's either, if you are there working, let us give you food, or is it, how do most employees view it?
I always felt personally that a lot of the amenities weren't really for me. They were for engineering teams that were socked into a way longer burn of writing code, heavy concentration, thinking about what they were like. I'm not saying that people who are not engineers at Google aren't also doing this, but I felt like the typical day and the nature of the work was just totally different from a meeting and answer email kind of culture. So like I remember seeing people play beach volleyball for the first time, and that's the very quintessential vision of Google, like Time Magazine or initially did, I think, and showing the scooters and the beach volleyball. And you think about it, those are people that are having a game of volleyball while their code's being checked in, or they just need to be fresh to just go and burn off some steam. And then
get
and then
some
go
fresh
back to
air
it.
too. Like
Absolutely.
literally get fresh air to get
Yes.
fresh thinking.
Literally outside air. A lot of people go home before dinner service starts. There's another whole subset of specifically, I think, engineering staff at Google that will usually start a little bit later in the morning and will take advantage of the dinner service that's happening. And then from there, with a lot of the glass buildings with no curtains and things like that, you actually see this kind of Christmas tree effect at night where there's a lot of people in the evenings that are there working. And if you didn't have some of those things through the day to disconnect, you wouldn't still be there. You'd turn around and you'd go home, which I guess would be fine. I think some of those things have been there to kind of help people just stitch together the very long project work and the engineering and things that they're working on. Really, it's everybody's choice. It's there on offer to you. You can take advantage of it if you'd like to. I think the cafes and whatnot, I think is largely an artifact too of where we've set ourselves up. You can't very easily get in cars and go to places to get food. A lot of the conveniences we're taking care of is the case in a lot of tech company campuses now. Take care of that.
It's become
people.
commonplace.
So,
I think Google sort of set the standard, though. I might be wrong.
If you look at Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Microsoft, these are companies making a lot of money. And it is a corporate decision and choice to turn around and make the office environment and the conveniences and the perks preferable to people that are working for you. And I think it's as simple as that. It's Larry and Sergey deciding very early that I know what I would want if I was working here. And that's what you feel with everything. It's just very thoughtful perks and benefits that just make sense. If I can share that, probably the most significant to me in my entire time working at Google came very early on, where there was a takeout food benefit for when you have a child and you're in the first weeks and months of raising your family, having your first child in some cases. There was I can't remember how much money. I think it was like $1,000 or maybe even more of takeout food. So you could expense takeout food within a certain amount of time after your child was born and submit those expenses, and Google would pay you back. The connection you felt to people that thought up this benefit and taking that extra off your plate, it's a very small thing, but just really thoughtful things, or subsidizing your hybrid car purchase back when hybrid cars were first coming out. And that was another thing that would help. Or even people that were looking to adopt, like taking care of some of the legal expenses involved in that. Like just really interesting things that you could tell people just sat down and said, okay, if we were to come up with some really important, significant, life-changing benefits, what would those be?
So let's turn to some of the fun perks.
Yeah.
Here's some things that I read about. Tell me if these are really exist. And you mentioned that you don't really, or you didn't feel like they were for you or that you took advantage of them. So fitness facilities, gyms?
Personally, I feel like I live in a climate where I don't need to be indoors while I exercise. I'm an outdoor person, but there's actually outdoor exercise now too, with teams of people that are running classes. You see it happening like in my building across the street. There's, an artificial turf soccer field, and at the one corner you can see the classes that are run. I personally, like I said, I'm a little more of a solitary exercise person, but yeah, absolutely, that's a thing.
Laundry?
Again, like if you think about the person that's commuting from somewhere in North Beach, San Francisco, but their desk is in Mountain View, and to think about commuting pre-COVID, this was like a 2-hour commute. When am I ever possibly going to get to doing my laundry? If I don't have laundry facilities where I live, I need to get somewhere else, versus just putting it in a sack and throwing it over your shoulder and bringing it to work and going downstairs. I knew friends that did this all the time, that would go like put in their laundry, go do some meetings, come back. And you think about the outlay for how much that would cost would be next to nothing, but that huge convenience for people to just not have to worry about that and to do it where they are.
And those people coming from San Francisco are riding down on a special Google bus, right? With Wi-Fi?
Yep, with Wi-Fi. That's another whole subculture in and of itself. The not taking meetings on it, not even talking too loudly to someone who you might be sitting next to. There's a whole code, apparently, in terms of how you carry yourself on the G bus.
Massages and nap pods and a bowling alley.
So
I had never heard about the bowling alley till I was doing some research.
The bowling alley is in our quad campus, actually, and it's a very popular team offsite sign-up facilities. You go and book the time in the bowling alley, and I think there's 2 or 3 lanes, and you can turn on some music, and you can also, if you're going to have your on-site, off-site catered through our food services, having some snack trays and things like that, those can be brought in, and it's just a nice team bonding experience. Certainly you could go and you could book time at one of these places locally, but if enough people are leaving, going off-site to do that, oftentimes it's more cost-effective to think about just providing that space. It can seem sort of over the top, but when you kind of work it out, you're like, well, that actually might make a little bit more sense to do it that way. The massage situation, I wanted to share a kind of personal perspective on that. What's interesting is...
It sounds awesome, by the way.
It sounds awesome. You get a massage credit every year on your birthday where you get a free massage. And the issue that I always had with it, and I haven't revisited it because I think now with some of the facilities, there are like wellness centers where, some of the on-site medical services and things like that are. So the rooms for this are located there. It used to be that there were conference rooms that were kind of commandeered by the masseuse people. And so I always found it kind of weird to be getting a massage while I could hear a meeting happening next door, or I knew that someone was working in the same space. So it was,
Yeah,
for
that's
me,
not
like,
really relaxing.
they were very thoughtful about where they located these rooms, but I felt kind of weird. Like sometimes I would pass by someone that would just come out of it, and their face would be all like pressed from and it just,
The towel
yeah,
creases in
exactly,
their
the towel
face.
creases. I could never get my head around it. Other people were fine and are fine, but I needed a little bit more separation between where I work and where I might get a massage. But fun fact too, this was another artifact of the early days of Google. Google originally being called Project Backrub at Stanford. That was the operating project name for what ended up becoming PageRank and Google Search as we know it. At Stanford, it was called Project Backrub. So
Background. Did just
because
Larry or
because
Sergey
Larry,
just
Larry
like
and Sergey
that?
liked to get massages, and that was a big deal for them.
Who
So
can blame them?
again, exactly. And now, if they're going to run their own company, everyone should get a massage whenever they want to.
Okay, so let's just move on to the nap pods. I've seen
Yeah.
pictures, so I know they exist.
I've seen members of our engineering team who I know have been kind of killing themselves working on something, pulling long nights, pulling long hours. In some cases, people with new families that are at work and have been up, but are also trying to meet the demands of whatever project they're on and just need to lie down. And it can be a little awkward to do that at your desk. It can be, go to your car, I guess, if you drove your car, but
Face
like,
down
yeah,
in your laptop.
exactly. And you'll definitely see that too, of just people
Yeah.
looking straight down, and their nap pods don't cost much money, and there's
Can you
usually
describe
dead
it for
spaces.
anyone, any
Yeah, so
listener that might
basically,
have not seen it?
the best thing to think of is picture a dentist chair that can recline back a little bit further, and then basically just a big bubble around you that can pull down almost like as a visor. As you're lying down, you look up, just imagine a half kind of semicircle dome that's over top of you. And in some of the more deluxe ones, I think there's a chance to turn on like a white noise. But the most random thing I think I've ever seen at Google was coming up a stairway, turning the corner, and looking and seeing Hulk Hogan in a nap pod. Just the most random thing I think I've ever seen.
You mean you
because,
can look in them? Are they glass?
Um,
So you saw Hulk Hogan napping?
yes, Hulk Hogan was napping, and it was very random. And it was, I think, a lot of celebrities and notable people that will be coming to Google will be on the lookout for things that they've heard of. And I think for him, it was, hey, I've heard about these nap pods. Can you show me one? And then he went and sat in them. And there was like an entourage with him. And I walked up and I could see him getting into it. And I said to someone, I said, is that Hulk Hogan, the wrestler? And they said, yeah, he's visiting Google today. And he really wanted to check out a nap pod. So,
Oh, that is, I mean, what a non sequitur, right? Sort of out of place. First that he would be at Google, and then he'd be in the nap pod.
yes.
Oh, I've also heard that dogs can come in. I just
Yeah.
love that idea. Do you feel like that increases productivity or just adds to the environment?
I think it does. I guess you think about that saying of bringing your whole self to work. A lot of people have pets, specifically dogs. Cats aren't allowed, but dogs are a big part of people's life. It's actually surprising. I haven't seen a case where a dog has been unruly or you sort of thought to yourself, they might not have wanted to bring that specific dog, right? It's just always
People
just
are
been
probably good regulators of that. They know
Absolutely.
if they've got that dog, that one will stay
Yes.
at home.
Well, there's even someone who works at Google as a Googler. A dog that comes to Google as a Doogler. so there's like
Doogler?
A Doogler, yeah. So there's like dogs at Google. There's a whole like community of people that talk about their dogs, and I always think it's great. And a lot of times too, when they come up to a cafe, they have to tie the dog at the door. They can't bring the dog in the cafe. It's a really funny experience because you see some people will just keep walking and ignore. And then there's some that can't not stop and say hello to the dog. And so there's a neat dynamic with it for sure. Or when dogs come to meetings, that's also another fun experience.
So why no cats? Do Larry and Sergey
I don't
just
know.
didn't like
I
cats?
think dogs are a little more portable than cats, really, when it gets right down
Yeah.
to it. You can't.
Well,
you can't.
I'm a dog person, so I'm
Exactly.
on board with this policy.
Yes, leashing a cat's just weird. So
Yeah. Well, and the dog cat thing. There's a whole dynamic. Let's just keep
Absolutely.
the culture pure.
yes,
We don't want Couglers. We just want Dooglers.
exactly.
I was reading about this one Google employee who said she was hired after 5 interviews that focused on leadership, role-related knowledge, problem solving, and Googleyness. Have you ever heard the word Googleyness? And if so, what is it?
So I have to be honest with you. Some of what we're talking about right now would be considered a little bit more internal and wouldn't say confidential, but I think the rigor that we would send people through for interviewing and that sort of thing, I think some of it travels, some of it gets outside of the walls of Google, people sharing those experiences. So the exact rigor that we're evaluating people on, I won't get into too much detail on, but that
Sure.
word, Googleyness, absolutely is a thing. And in my opinion, is just a fascinating word. The best thing that I can explain to tell you what Googleyness is that we do performance reviews twice a year where if you and I work together, you can ask me for a peer review and I can write what my experience working with you is. Managers do an employee assessment. And I remember there was a line that I read as a manager between a peer and someone that was on my team. And she wrote, this individual personifies the often ill-defined googliness. Immediately, I just knew what she meant because I knew the spirit of the person. And if I think about what some of those attributes of being googly are, it is ill-defined and it is very open to interpretation, sometimes overused internally. And I think that really what it comes down to is looking at what some of the key principles of the company are, both like what we want to be in people's lives, the awesome responsibility we have with that, things like trust and privacy, like a lot of those sorts of things where you just have to understand what you've waded into here by choosing to try to help people connect with information broadly. So there's some of those key principles that you just have to be mindful of. And by that, I mean, by being mindful of those things, you will raise those things in work discussion. You'll say, well, have we thought about this? Like, is this actually okay? Have we considered talking with some of our privacy folks or our legal teams? And like, you can only illustrate it through example, I think. There's no definition. There is no stated definition where you could go somewhere in our internal systems and say,
In your
aha,
handbook,
I found
the
it.
Google
Yes,
handbook doesn't say googliness,
exactly.
colon.
But you know when you're experiencing it, and you know when it's just slightly off sometimes, and it's not generally very off with most people I work with. That's the fascinating part of it. But example being the person that will say, "Hey, I know you're going to be in this other building. I booked a meeting room for you, so it's easier for you to talk to me." Just these small gestures of just really thinking empathetically and that you're working together as a team, that it's not an individual thing, and just these little things. Like if someone says to me, "Hey, I'm running a little bit late. I'm going to be about 3 minutes late." To me, I say, "Ah, that's super googly, that person to like tell me," because you don't have to, but just these little things here and there that are just moments of googliness. And it's maybe a little like a lot of other interpersonal skills, like, are you just born with it or can you train it? There is a certain type of person that I feel like I've worked with over my 15 years that you don't need to necessarily teach it to these people that you're working with. Like, it's just sort of an inherent thing. And what I think that the interview process does try to tease out a little bit to kind of get to the root of who you're talking to and are they a fit and would they be additive to the culture and help us get to where we're trying to get to. And
Because it's a really rigorous interview process. I mean, I read some incredible statistic about how many people apply every year, and just like getting into a selective college or something, it's not just the absolute smartest people. I mean, they're looking for
yeah,
just a whole list of criteria, innovative and creative, and obviously empathic and supportive and collaborative and fun,
yes.
right? You need to have a lot of attributes to get through the door.
And I think to share just a little bit of personal experience with that, I hail from the interview experience where there weren't caps on the number of rounds. It was perhaps even more intensive then. And I've thought a lot about this topic because there's so many different layers to it. Like you said, there's the educational aspect of it, which personally I don't check the boxes on. I don't come from the internationally elite school with the best marks at that school, which is what a lot of my colleagues from the 15 years ago era coming in the door did have. I think I did 9 months and 14 rounds, and it was a journey. But I think in the end, we get to the right place with almost all of our hires. And you can look back and say, yeah, the process is intensive, but I think it's there for a reason. And I think we do get to a good place with the people that end up coming in.
You had made yourself a real specialist in Google Maps. So that's the kind of innovative, deep thinking I'm sure that they were looking for.
The first question I think that they would ask in that interview is, tell me about the ways that you're passionate about Google. Why is Google interesting to you, or why do you love what we're doing? And I pre-working at Google would literally wake up every morning writing blog posts and covering what people were doing and thinking of Google Maps. And so it was sort of what at that time devoted my life to. I just keep coming back to the I'm feeling lucky phrase, but I still to this day have the same passion for it. I sometimes don't feel like it's a job. There's so much interesting content and product information and people that you're serving that it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel like work in a lot of ways.
And culture-wise, one of the things that they offer are these TGIFs, which for a lot of transparency with the top execs.
Yeah.
Can you describe what those are? And do you think that has an impact on the culture sort of flowing downwards about how people interact with each other?
I'm really, really, really glad you mentioned TGIF because it is, in my opinion, one of the crown jewels of Google culture. It's unfortunate that the outside world doesn't get to experience it in the way that a Google employee does and probably never will. The concept of TGIF does go back to the early days of the Palo Alto startup office. I've seen some of the video footage they have of people literally holding a beer, having a snack, like everybody kind of congregating around a bunch of cubicles and just everybody kind of going around. So what's happened this week? What have we shipped? What's exciting? What do you want to share? And that spirit is very much translated into, first of all, it used to be Friday at 5 p.m., which is the worst time zone and time slot in the world. Because if you think about it, it's great for Pacific time, West Coast, US, Canada, but one time zone over on a Friday, people are long gone.
Yes.
And one more time zone over from that, even further gone. Go to Europe.
It's weekend, yeah.
Yeah, go to Europe, they are squarely on a Saturday. So we moved TGIF, thank goodness it's Friday, to Thursday Pacific time, whereby
kept the name though, kept the F.
Yes, kept the F because it's Friday somewhere. In the more classic time slot of end of day Thursday, it is people in the Tokyo office arriving at work, getting their breakfast, sitting down in a cafe and watching the TGIF proceedings. And most time zones can do this. If it's not a time zone that's conducive to it, it's recorded and people will screen it. So first of all, it's a very global event. Everybody's connected to it wherever you are at any office around the world. Personally, for me, it's where I feel the most close to working at Google. You go in, it's in the original big cafe, Charlie's, and you have the co-founders, now Sundar, less Larry and Sergey, just in the ways that their capacity has changed. But for a lot of years, it was both of them, sometimes Eric as well, so all three of them. And there's just so many different fine points, down to things like Larry wearing very simple primary color t-shirts and his microphone and the foam around the microphone being matched with the color of his shirt. At the beginning, all of the new Googlers are welcomed. And for the people
they're called Nooglers?
Yes.
So now we've got Googlers, Dooglers, and Nooglers.
Yes. There's lots of different other prefixes that we can talk about. But a Noogler has the hat and the propeller, and they've just done their training. And at the end of the training is TGIF, and they're excited. They're sitting, in the front rows of the seating, and they're all welcome to stand up. And the names fly by on the screen if you're training coming in from another office. And there's just this one line, I feel like I'm at liberty to share it. It's carried forward. Sundar says the same thing now, but as soon as the welcome is over, Sergey would say, okay, now get back to work. There's this everybody that's hearing it for the first time laughs. And then everyone that's heard it for the 400th time kind of he said it again. And it would just be this fun, playful moment where, he's telling me to get back to work, that kidder, and you'd sit back down and, and then the announcements and whatever TGIF presentation would carry forward. But for me, I will always try to go to TGIF in person and listen literally to the leadership of the company tell me what's up and what they're thinking about. A huge part of TGIF is just Q&A. And the number one question that everyone wants answered is read out. The transparency is fascinating to me. This is what everybody wants the answer to. And either Sundar or a member of his leadership team is sourced to be available and is oftentimes will come in person and answer the question in person. The whole thing, it's literally like a Netflix series. You keep tuning into it.
And is there just this expectation that everything said there stays in that room? You
absolutely.
Don't go share it with your family or your best friend?
Absolutely not. Yeah, this is the part that has probably gotten me the most down about the way Google has changed, is that there just have been a subset of people that don't understand the special moment we have with that. And they're very, very, very stern warnings at the beginning of TGIF that says, hey, just a reminder, you may be lulled into thinking that this is just like, yeah, go and tell anyone. No, like this is for us. This is we're a family. This is a family thing.
I imagine some of your disappointment at those times was because part of the Googleyness was probably trust and honesty and, within the family, and to see that possibly broken down is heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll speak very directly. Don't you realize what working here is all about? This is rule number 1, in my opinion. Like, don't share information. And I'm making sure I'm sharing the right information with you about TGIF as a whole, but I think these are artifacts of our culture that have been talked about quite a bit.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's been
Thank
so
you.
Interesting to get a deep dive into Googleyness.
I don't think I've ever been able to spend this amount of time to explain all my thoughts on this, so it's really, really enjoyable and fun to chat about it.
Many of Mike's experiences at Google can apply to all of us, no matter where we work or how we spend our days. Here are some of my takeaways. Number 1, notice and appreciate moments of serendipity. When you run into people, at the espresso machine or elsewhere, take time to make connections. 2, always keep your eyes peeled for unexpected pleasures, like, for example, finding a pro wrestler in a nap pod in your office. 3, dogs make any workspace better. 4, demonstrating passion for something can be a lot more valuable than just getting top marks at elite schools. 5, transparency and communication are treasures in business or personal relationships. And finally, number 6, if you ever do run your own company, why not? Free massages for all. Huge thanks to the wonderful Mike Pegg for sharing his thoughts and insights about Google with me. Please visit our website, theexperiencepodcast.net, to explore other episodes and find out how to follow us on social media. And if you're enjoying the Experience Podcast, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate, review, and subscribe. It helps others discover us. A new episode drops every Wednesday. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thanks for joining in the experience.